Empower the use of open source with software composition analysis from Revenera.
Hello, and welcome to another software composition analysis podcast from Revenera. I'm Kendra Morton, your host and principal product marketing manager, also at Revenera. I'm joined today by Alex Ryback, Senior Director of Product Management, and Niraj Thakur, Product Security Engineer. So hey guys, welcome to you both. Thanks for being here.
Hey Kendra, see you again.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. So we're here to talk about the announcement from the OpenSSL project regarding two new high severity vulnerabilities impacting OpenSSL versions 3.0 and later. A lot has happened over the last week or so. So Alex, perhaps you can help summarize for our audience what's really transpired up till now.
Sure. So we tend to be recording these every quarter now, which is kind of the cadence of things that seem to be in the news, right? So there's new vulnerabilities essentially on a daily basis, but there's some headline grabbers. This was certainly one of them, just due to the fact that OpenSSL was kind of one of the first projects that got a lot of prominence back in 2014 with Heartbleed, and the vulnerability back then got marketing, got a logo, got a website, which was a big change to the way things happened in the past. So since then, each new vulnerability kind of has its own nice marketing name and so forth. So when OpenSSL popped back up on the radar, a lot of people got nervous. So essentially what happened was in late October, I think it was around the 27th or so, OpenSSL warned of a critical vulnerability and that there would be a patch forthcoming on November 1st. So vulnerability was limited to version 3.x, which kind of gave everybody a bit of a pause and a bit of a breather, because it's just not a version that's been very heavily used. There's still a lot of people on 1.x, so there wasn't as much panic as when Heartbleed came out. But certainly it was important enough to where everybody was on notice that come November 1st, make sure by then you've certainly identified everywhere you may be exposed and expect to download the latest version, which ultimately became 3.07, and make sure that you patch all of your current 3.x instances. Now, the interesting thing was that on November 1st, when the patch was released, the severity was actually downgraded to high, which, again, gave everybody a bit of a chance to relax. Typically, things go the other way. Things become more serious as folks dig deeper and look into the security issues. In this case, it went from a critical down to a high. But nonetheless, there are still two vulnerabilities that all deal with certificates. And folks still need to be mindful that even if their operating system is using an old SSL version 1.x, that their apps and or containers may be using version 3.x. So best to check and make sure that if you're on 3.0 through 3.06, that you upgrade to 3.07. So that's kind of where we're at today.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we reference back to Heartbleed in 2014. So how are these vulnerabilities different than what happened back then?
Yeah, so I guess one of the biggest differences is there have been 8 years worth of additional vulnerabilities. So people have just gotten kind of more used to these types of news and gotten better at dealing with them. Heartbleed back in 2014 when it came out affected over 20% of the servers out on the internet. So it was extremely impactful. It was also one of the first, like I mentioned, kind of well-publicized vulnerabilities and caught a lot of people on their heels. So there was a lot of kind of, what do we do? How do we react to it? This isn't something we're good at doing. So it's different now. I think companies have gone through enough cycles to where most have some general idea on how to react to such an event. The other thing that's very different is OpenSSL 3 is less than a year old. And it's got a pretty narrow base of products that require patching, unlike Heartbleed, where everything had OpenSSL, every single operating system, and it was very pervasive, so it required everybody to act. The other thing that's different is Heartbleed impacted servers, whereas these vulnerabilities are more on the client side. So the issues are rooted in certificates, which are verified typically by the client. So it's not as impactful and certainly less use out there. But again, kind of the same thing I said to the first question, make sure that you check all instances, not just your operating system, but the apps that you deploy and any containers, whether they're yours or third party, to make sure that they don't have vulnerable versions of 3.x.
Again, good point. So Niraj, to you, what does all of this mean, right?
Alex already spoke about the overall or highlight of what has been recently noted. The main issue is that, anything which is popping up nowadays from a security perspective, any component we talk about Log4j, we talk about OpenSSL, we talk about zlib, all of this, the hype that has been created for Log4j, the kind of chaos which was created for zlib, and different kind of open source vulnerabilities which are coming in nowadays, right? That is the trigger for this particular vulnerability as well, which is with respect to OpenSSL. Now, the point is that OpenSSL again is a very widely used component. It's very much similar to Log4j, wherein most of the organizations, most of the products are or most of the operating systems, they all use OpenSSL. So it becomes very natural for any of the product managers, product owners, or the engineering side of it to become, to go in a panic mode and to look for the impact, to look for the understanding of what patches are being released. So the main issue which came out for OpenSSL is that in the beginning of it, it seemed like this security bug is again, going to be truly awful. But however, after spending some time and the analysis which was coming out from NVD, that said that this particular bug is not a critical bug, and it was downgraded to a high severity, which came up to a CVE rating of 8.8. So there are two CVEs which we are talking about. We are talking about CVE 2022-3786 and 2022-3602. Both have different kind of scenarios, not much different, but yes, some of the rationale for exploiting both of them are different. One is the CV 2022-3786 is with respect to the X.509 email address variable length buffer overflow. However, if we talk about the CV 2022-3602, that is about X.509 email address 4-byte buffer overflow. So both have the severity rating of 3.8, and both, in case you're using OpenSSL 3.0.0 through 3.0.6, you are vulnerable. But the point is that this is not very prevalent because OpenSSL 3.x is just a year old, and not many of the components, not many of the products, not many of the operating systems are using it. So it is not really as exploitable as the one which came in 2014, that is Heartbleed. And Heartbleed was, I would say, it was venomous. There were so many exploits available in the market as soon as this particular vulnerability, that is Heartbleed, was released. There were so many exploitations happening in place, and that the exploitation of that particular vulnerability was not that difficult. The exploitation for this particular vulnerability which we are talking about, it is going to be difficult, because the rationale for exploiting this particular vulnerability is going to be tougher than Heartbleed. We have memory buffer overrun, and it takes a lot of skill set and a lot of knowledge to understand and craft the exploit for exploiting these kind of vulnerabilities. So you cannot just go ahead straight away and exploit all these vulnerabilities which are being released. So even till date, we do not have at least in my understanding and experience, we do not have any kind of exploits available in the market which can showcase, or we have any kind of POC for this particular OpenSSL issue 3.x, which has been released in the market. So in a nutshell, what I would say is, this particular vulnerability, again, it is a vulnerability to be focused on. We still have to go ahead and upgrade, but we do not have to really go get into the chaotic mode and go ahead and be panicking about how do we fix it. Rather, you plan this, you go for a patch. For operating systems also, you cannot go ahead and do the patching right away. You need to find out what is the you need to go for the manual compilation of the OpenSSL releases, and then you need to upgrade that. So you have to be patient, and you have to strategize the patch that is coming through, which is 3.0.7. So that is all about this OpenSSL vulnerability, the recent one which we are talking about, Kendra.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Raj. So message there is still high severity, but a little bit of a deep breath. just put your plan in place to fix it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but what can I know? And Alex started to touch on this. What exactly can be exploited? You can go a little deeper on that for us.
Sure. So, if we talk about both the vulnerabilities, right? The first vulnerability we are talking about is CV20223786. Okay, so 3786 can be exploited. This can be exploited to cause a buffer overflow through a specifically crafted X.509 certificate. Now, again, as the content this here in 3786 that cannot be controlled by a potential attacker, the only plausible impact is denial of service attack. However, in the subsequent one, which is the CV20223602, the one that we are taking, the one that is again along with 3786, the impact is that along with denial of service, we also have remote code execution which can happen. Okay, so all we have to focus on is while memory overflow bugs, they can lead to worst case scenarios. The details of this particular vulnerability, this seem to indicate that the level of difficulty for an exploit is very high. This again, the vulnerability requires a malformed certificate that is either trusted or signed by a naming authority or a certificate authority. That means that the authorities that who have built it, they should quickly be able to prevent certificates designed to target these kind of vulnerabilities from being either created or further limiting the scope. So that would be the possibility when we are trying to exploit this. The exploitation of this is sorry, not going to be very straightforward. It is not going to be very easy if we compare this with respect to Heartbleed. Rather, what we have to understand is that to exploit this particular vulnerability, we first need is the malformed certificate, which is signed by SCA, which is not very easy to get. Second thing is that even if you get that, it is very easy for the certificate providers or the one who have built it. It is very easy for them to prevent it. If it is not easy, then it is at least very it is very easy for them to go back and check that what can be done to prevent this. So prevention also is a very easy step for them. If we talk, dig little deeper on what has really happened or what can really be exploited, we say that we see that in this particular vulnerability, the buffer overrun, this can be triggered in X.509 certificate verification, and specifically, in the name constant checking. And we also have to understand that this occurs only after, the certificate change signature verification. And this requires either the one that we talked about, the malformed certificate, which is coming in from the CA, and the certificate for the application to continue certificate verification, despite failure to construct any kind of path to trusted issuer. That is the overall rationale for exploitation of this. Now, the attacker, what they have to do is they have to craft a malicious email address to overflow the 4 attacker controlled bytes on the stack, and this buffer overflow results in a crash, or if went further, it can potentially cause remote code execution. So again, many platforms implement stack overflow protections which would mitigate against the risk of remote code execution. The risk here is that this may be further mitigated again based on stack layout for any given platform or compiler. So that is how the overall vulnerability that is how the overall vulnerability has been reported like. So that's all about how it can be exploited, or the details about the exploit.
Okay, great. Thank you, Niraj. So to both of you, let's kind of wrap it up. So what should security and development teams be doing right now to find OpenSSL in their applications and implement these patches? Alex, maybe? Alex?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, from what I've understood is kind of work with your existing process, right? Make sure that you have plans to patch. I certainly wouldn't drop everything companies are doing to release an emergency patch. Make sure you've identified all possible exploits within your product lines. Make sure your SBOMs are up to date so that your customers are aware of your use. Make sure that you are following whatever process you have defined internally to let your customers know when to expect a release that fixes a particular exploit, and then run it per your prioritization process, just like you would any other bug. But as always, whenever we hit one of these scenarios, I always say, don't forget to look back at others, right? Go back and look at your log4js, look at your OpenSSL V1s, make sure that all the past offenders, hopefully you're kind of keeping a list of all these past events, make sure that none of them require subsequent patching as well, right? Don't let this be an isolated incident. Take this as an opportunity to kind of revise and refresh your processes and make sure that you're up to the latest patch level on all your main used components.
Absolutely. Raj, anything to add?
Yeah. So, a few things to add. The one that Alex talked about, I think that is of topmost priority, like having your SBOMs in place. That has to be analyzed. All the SCA scans, you have to do the scans and, get the results analyzed. There are many operating systems also we talked about, right? So it is very important that we do the infrastructure scans also with, any commercial tools, like there are many of them available. And, the asset and risk register also should be available so that you can quickly identify that what kind of asset we have within the organization and what is the version we are running. And if we have any past, any risk identified in the past, those should be available as part of those registers. A continuous, monitoring of the vulnerability related to the any kind of component is something should be on the top of the list. And then the last one is that, it's a good practice or one of the leading practices that you keep your components updated with the latest and stable version of the libraries that you're using.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Well, thank you to you both. So to summarize just a little bit, right? So it's important for companies to always know what's in their code, to utilize SCA solutions and act quickly when vulnerabilities are uncovered. What will help is if security and development teams have a strategy and the right tools in place to produce the software bill of materials. And that should include all subcomponents, hidden dependencies, and associated licenses. And it's important to track all the components in your software, regardless of where in the supply chain they originate, both inside and outside of your organization. So a bit of a summary there. So we'll keep providing updates on OpenSSL as more information comes to light if necessary. Feel free to check our website and blogs for more details as well. And I want to thank both Alex and Niraj. Thank you for joining today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Kendra.
Yeah, very good. And to our audience, we'll talk again for sure real soon. Thank you. Have a great day.
Empower the use of open source with software composition analysis from Revenera.